And welcome to Rock, Paper, Swords, the historical action and adventure podcast. My name is Matthew Harvey.
And my name is Stephen A. Mackay.
We're both best-selling historical fiction authors, and together we chat about all things historical and anything that could fall under the banner of action and adventure in books, film, TV, and games.
Oh, and we also talk about rock music from time to time.
For weeks now, the supermarkets have been stocking ghostly decorations and all manner of ghoulish tat. And of course, that modern symbol of Halloween, the pumpkin. All Hallows' Eve is almost upon us, and today we're going to talk about some of the history behind the festival and also highlight a couple of our books that are spooky and perfect for this time of year as the nights draw in.
The oldest and strongest emotion of mankind is fear, and the oldest and strongest kind of fear is fear of the unknown. H.P. Lovecraft.
I thought you'd like that quote.
I think I used one of his quotes. Actually, it's probably in Night of the Cross.
It is not that quote, but
no, it's one of his. Mm-hmm.
So, the history of Halloween first.
Mm-hmm.
What do you know about the history of Halloween, Stephen?
Well, this is when the souls cross over at the autumn, turning into winter, and nature's dying off, and people are dying off, and their souls are then going to go to wherever. The other side.
Is that Samhain? I don't know how you pronounce
come on,
it.
Matthew. Matthew, come on. You do not pronounce it.
Tell me how you pronounce it.
Samhain.
Samhain.
I think in England it's Sohan or Sohan. Samhain or Sohan. That is.
Okay, but written.
Yeah, Samhain. It's bizarre. I don't know where they've come up with this pronunciation, but apparently Gaelic or whatever the origin.
So Samhain.
Samhain, yeah, but it feels bizarre. I would say Samhain as well.
So Samhain. Let's call it Samhain now. That's okay. We'll call it.
If you can remember, yep.
I can remember. So it's the end of the harvest. Is this like where we think that Halloween started with Samhain?
Yeah, it's supposed to be that, as you say, the harvest ends. So it's basically everything's ending and dying off for winter to come in. And apparently the souls would also congregate about this time and before they moved over to the other side or whatever.
So I have a note here about something called Lemuria. What is Lemuria? Do you know about that?
No, I'm surprised you wrote that down. Was that not an invention of some crazy guy around about the 1940s?
Well, apparently the Lemuralia or Lemuria was a feast in the religion of ancient Rome during which the Romans performed rites to exorcise the malevolent and fearful ghosts of the dead from their homes. The feast, though, was in May, so it was not at the time of the harvest, though. So it was a similar sort of idea to the Samhain thing of
that would be more like
ghoulies, but
that would be more of a Beltane type.
So is that pronounced Beltane? It's not pronounced Bellin.
No, it's definitely Beltane because there's a Jethro Tull song that's the chorus. So.
I don't understand why the AIN in that is pronounced Ain, but it's not in Samhain.
Maybe it's the H, and there's an E at the end of Beltane as well. Usually,
I think you're having me on about the pronunciation.
Well, I'm no expert.
Well, that's not what you always tell me. You're an expert in everything.
That's what I tell my kids as well, but they've come to realise it's untruthful.
It's not true. So so we've got the beginning of winter, the end of the harvest, the boundary between the worlds thinning, and there were common things in the, let's call it Celtic period. I know some people would say it's not really Celtic, but the old Britons had bonfires and all sorts of things going on then.
Yeah, I think it was probably an excuse to tell scary stories as well. Like Beowulf, which we'll get into in a bit. It is a dark time of year after summer, and it's nice to kind of scare yourself at times. So that was probably just the feast where you would do that rather than give gifts or celebrate new life.
Do you think people like being scared then?
Well, I don't personally really like I mean, I'm a fan of H.P. Lovecraft, but I don't find these stories scary. I just find them interesting. But a lot of people love horror movies. I don't. But
no, I'm not a particular fan of horror movies, but you're right. It's very, very popular, and I do wonder though if throughout history that's been a running theme that people have just enjoyed being scared.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I listen to spooky podcasts all day about ghosts and stuff like that. So I do, to an extent, enjoy being scared and the fear of the unknown and fear of death and what's to come afterwards and stuff like that. I think everybody has that kind of fear.
So I know I keep saying so. You hate it when I do that, but I
No,
can't
no,
help myself.
I only hate it when I have to edit a part.
Oh, okay.
and you say so at the start of it doesn't fit with it because you've not, it's a jarring.
Yes, yeah. I
So
will.
you say so as much as you like, unless there's a break.
Thank you, Stephen.
Don't mention it.
So, no, I don't know what to say.
Just say so.
Just say
you will anyway.
It's true.
Well then,
the name. Well then, the name Halloween, of course, comes from All Hallows Eve, which is the day before All Saints Day or All Hallows Day. So it's like the contraction of All Hallows Evening. This, of course, is a Christian festival. So the Christians, as they did with everything from Easter to Christmas, they stole the Samhain festival and said, "We'll have that. We'll make it one of ours now." And so it becomes the night before the celebration of All Hallows Day, or is it also known as All Saints Day as well? Yes, no. So in Spain, I'm thinking because I lived in Spain for a long time, what they call it. I think it's All Saints Day. Yeah, the All Hallows. Yeah. Anyway, yeah, Dia de los Santos. It is, yeah. So it's an interesting time of spookiness. And whereabouts did the whole pumpkin carving come from? Because that is something which, of course, now is everywhere.
Ubiquitous.
That's the word.
Well, I think just like Christianity, this was down to those other well-known rip-off merchants, the Americans, who stole in Scotland and Ireland, I'm led to believe, they used to carve turnips. Because obviously we never had pumpkins in this country. So we had to use that other well-known, easy-to-carve vegetable, turnip. You've obviously never tried to carve a turnip, Matthew. You would have laughed hysterically there.
I've never tried to carve a pumpkin, but I do know they're incredible. Sorry, a turnip. I actually have carved a pumpkin, but I don't think I've ever carved a turnip. But I know that turnips are like rock.
Yeah, they're extremely hard, which I never realised. I'm sure I did it with my kids. I don't know why. I must have just been nostalgic for the days when I was small and my mum made us do turnips. Well, she did it anyway. And it's incredibly difficult. You would not believe how hard it is to carve.
They're not hollow either, are they? So
no, well, neither are pumpkins, but you can just scoop them out.
Well, the pumpkins you scoop out all the seeds, and so they're basically hollow.
It's messy, but it's fairly easy. Yeah. Whereas a turnip's basically just rock solid.
Yeah,
so you have to cut the whole thing out with a knife, and it's not as easy as it sounds, and then try and carve a face in, which again is much harder than a soft pumpkin. But that was started, I'm not sure I think it was Irish. So I've got this, I had a wee look earlier. Apparently there was somebody called Stingy Jack. Who couldn't get into heaven or hell for some reason. And I don't know why, but he was cursed to wander the earth because he couldn't get into either of these places. So Stingy Jack would wander the earth, and the Irish people would carve these turnips to scare him off, basically.
So that's where the jack-o'-lantern
I suppose it would be.
Comes from
it must be. Uh-huh. Although that sounds American as well, doesn't it? But I don't know about that. It must be that. Yeah.
No, I looked that up actually, and it was it's the Jack of the Lantern is the thing, and it comes from the same sort of thing of will o' wisps, which is just that contraction, of course, of the of the or whatever. So you got the will-o'-the-wisp and the jack-o'-lantern. Yeah, and it's these lanterns that are made out of turnips originally to scare off, as you say.
And
Was it Stingy Jack?
Stingy Jack,
As
yeah.
otherwise known as Stinky Jack, I think sounds better. I think we should
Well,
Stinky.
I don't know. Does stingy mean the same to you as it does to me?
To me, it means someone who won't pay for things. Yeah.
Yeah, aye. I'm never sure with the meanings of words being the same in Scotland as they are in other places, because this is one of we call it guising up here when kids go to doors, dress up and go to doors, and whereas everybody else now calls it trick or treat, and so do we usually now. But guising apparently is really a Scottish thing as well.
Ah.
We're the only ones apparently that call it guising.
So that's because you're disguised.
I would think so. That seems the obvious answer.
That's interesting. Yes, there's a thing in mumming is the term used. It says Ireland, Scotland. Oh, I'm just looking here at something saying mumming and guising. But I don't know if the guising is what it's called in Ireland as well. You think it's only Scotland?
Well, maybe Ireland as well, because we're obviously very close and we share. Well, a lot of them come over here and stuff, and we do have a lot of shared culture. So I probably is Irish as well.
So the mumming and the guising is going around to people's houses dressed up and scaring them, I guess.
Well, yeah, it's to scare them, I think, now, but originally I think it was to hide from or to scare evil spirits. These spirits that haven't crossed over yet. They're hanging around on Halloween night. So to scare them off, you dress up as something extra scary. Or to disguise yourself so that they don't know who you are. I assume it's people that have done a lot of bad stuff in their life that they're having to disguise themselves from all these dead people that are coming to get them.
Maybe, unless the dead people are just wandering around getting anybody. So
how would a disguise help you then?
Because then they think you're one of the ghosts. So they don't get you, then you get the living.
Maybe. So they're not actually targeting you. They're just going for anybody.
Maybe, yeah. I mean, that's the theory, I'm guessing.
Evil bastards.
Evil stalks the land. So this time of the mumming or guising, I'm reading here that often it includes a man dressed up as a white horse or a white mare originally, maybe not so much now, although I think it still happens in certain villages. And I can't even begin to try to pronounce what this is because I'm pronouncing it wrong, but Lair and then Bhan. So I'm guessing this is from Ireland.
Right.
So, but
Larvan or something. I don't know either,
something like that. And so the youths would lead this horseman, white mare, around house to house, reciting verses, some of which were pagan, and then in exchange for food. So it's a bit like the trick or treating thing. So you turn up and sing a song or something and get some food. And if the household donated food, then they could expect to receive good fortune. But if you didn't, you'd get bad luck and misfortune. So it's just trick or treating.
Well, yeah, you would get the misfortune of the kids coming back later and TP in your house.
Does that really happen? I know it happens in America. We see it in American movies. This thing of throwing toilet paper all over someone's house, I've never seen it happen.
I don't think I've ever seen. I've seen the egging in Scotland.
Egging, I've seen, yeah.
Yeah, that's happened because there was actually a guy in my village. I don't know his name, so I can't get any libel or anything, but he got arrested because somebody egged his house, teenagers, and they went out and punched him.
Oh, wow.
That was just down the road from me. So I know egging happens, so I'd imagine TPing does happen as well.
Wow. There you go. So lesson to be learned. If your house gets egged, don't go and punch the people responsible. So another thing that was interesting at this time of year was another thing about the thinning of the veil between the worlds. It was a period of when you could divine things of the future, apparently. So this sort of divination. So you could divine things to ward off evil spirits, and there were rituals, but then also games. So it's in Scotland, they'd have divination games were later banned by the church in some parishes because, of course, the church is not really into
Fun.
divination at all. But yeah, the divining thing seems to have gone on for a long time. There's even there's greeting cards from the early 20th century with divination. On Halloween, look in the glass, your future husband's face will pass. So looking in a mirror and seeing you can divine things. So
I'll have to try that.
Things like maybe you'll see your husband. And so bobbing apples apparently comes from is a divination game.
So do you do that in England?
I haven't done it. I haven't been to any sort of Halloween things for a while, but when I was a kid, I do remember doing apple bobbing as a thing. So if anyone's listening who doesn't know what that is, you basically have a big thing, bucket or bowl or something with water, but big, and you have apples floating in it. You have to, without using your hands, using only your mouth, pick up an apple, basically get an apple out of the water.
I don't think that's how we do it.
How do you do it?
I remember dropping a fork from your teeth to try and spear the apple.
That's very weird.
Although we've now got a blow-up apple bobbing thing in the shape of a coffin. You wouldn't want to drop a fork in that, so maybe you do it with your mouth.
Well,
I don't know. I'd kind of stay out the road when all that's going on and the people are coming to the door and that, because obviously, as you know, I'm extremely antisocial.
Well, you're just there to punch them if they TP your house. You're just ready in the background, ready to leap out.
Kill somebody.
Get off my land. Well, apparently apparently apples in Celtic mythology are strongly associated with the other world and immortality, which is why they've remained as part of the sort of the rituals of Halloween.
All these cultures, ours anyway, have so many things, so many feast days, so many evil spirits hanging around the place, and ways to get rid of them. It's hard to keep up.
It's hard to keep up that. Yeah, I guess it's I'm just thinking it's like whack-a-mole then with the beasties.
All the different methods to get rid of
coming out. Yeah. So in my in-depth research into Halloween, which is not that in-depth,
Wikipedia.
Let's not mention where my research took place because it's highly secret. I like to keep my sources secret, and I believe nobody else knows of the source that I use. So, thing though that another Halloween type ritual or practice that happens around the last Thursday of October in Somerset. And as I'm living very near Somerset, I live really close to the border of Somerset. In fact, when I used to drive to Bath to work, I went from Wiltshire into Somerset and then into Bath. So there's a thing called Punky Night, and I've never ever heard of this. I've been living here for 20 years. I've never heard of Punky Night, but I did like the name.
Was that a Sex Pistols gig?
Well, that's what I think. So apparently children would march around with a jack-o'-lantern singing the following song, and I don't know the tune to the song, which is a pity because otherwise I would sing it with the tune. But the words are, "It's Punky Night tonight, it's Punky Night tonight, Adam and Eve would not believe it's Punky Night tonight."
Genius.
It's genius.
I'm crying now.
So if you could write a tune to that, we can sing it later. There are some other variants which include these lines: "Give me a candle, give me a light. If you don't, you'll get a fright." That doesn't.
Well, I thought that was going a different direction.
I know, yeah, you're a pile of shite.
Exactly.
Yeah,
I can just imagine Johnny Rotten singing this.
Or alternatively, "Give me a candle, give me a light. If you haven't a candle, a penny's all right." That one scans better. That scans better than the other one. So the origins for this custom are not known, but the word punky is an old English name for lantern, so it could be dates back to there. And apparently, it wasn't just turnips; it was also mangel-wurzels were used instead of pumpkins. What's a mangel-wurzel?
It sounds very rustic.
It does sound really rustic, doesn't it? I'm going to have to quickly.
Well, I know what a mangle is, and Wurzel used to be the guitarist in Motorhead.
I'm just going to have to look in my this place that I research, which will not be named. It's Mangelwurzel or Mangold Wurzel, which comes from the German Mangle. Oh, it's charred, and Wurzel is root. Also known as mangold, mangle beet, field beet, fodder beet. Wow, an archaic root of scarcity. I like that one. It's a cultivated root vegetable. It looks very similar to a swede to me. It's a beet, basically.
I was on a beetroot or something.
Yeah.
So did they maybe carve them?
So they used to carve them as well. So it
right.
says they used them for all sorts of things. They used them for sport, apparently, in England, for mangold hurling.
Well, it's better than eating them.
Probably. In 1830, Scottish cookbook, The Practice of Cookery, included a recipe for a beer made with mangelwurzel. Oh, this is if we can get rock music in here as well. We've got all of the things we love: history, rock, history, and food, and beer, and a bit of rock music.
Not beat so. I had them when I was a child, and I was sick straight after.
In 19th century American usage, mangle beets were sometimes referred to as mango. There you go. And during the Irish famine, of the potato famine of the mid 19th century, something happened.
Something happened.
Something happened then, yeah.
It's exciting stuff here.
Something happened about people growing some mangelwurzels. I don't know what. I can't be bothered to read it all.
Instead of potatoes.
Instead of potatoes, I'm guessing. So there you go, mangelwurzels and Punky Night.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know if you've ever heard of Punky Night before. I never had.
No, I never have.
Well, you have now. What about the Dance Macabre? Have you heard of that?
Yes, in various ways. I never realised it was like some kind of French opera or something. There's various rock bands or heavy metal bands have had albums and songs called that. Iron Maiden have got Dance of Death, which has got the worst cover art ever. And there's some other bands have albums named after it. And there's even a episode of The Prisoner, which I'm sure is, well, it's called Dance of Death as well. But I don't think any of them have got anything to do with what you're talking about.
Well, what am I talking about?
Well, this is supposed to be where death plays a fiddle, apparently, and the skeletons all come out their grave and dance to it.
This seems to be the thing, yeah.
And the living would join in and be taken away, and they would die as well, I suppose. until the next year.
Yeah, the Dance Macabre is sometimes enacted in European village pageants and court masks with people dressing up as corpses from various strata of society. Wow.
See, this is more like modern Halloween. People dressing up like skeletons, corpses, zombies, rather than just doing Punky Night.
Punky Night, yeah. I like the idea of Punky Night. I'm going to do a bit of Punky Night.
Carrying around a beetroot with a candle in it.
A mangelwurzel. I love the name Mangelwurzel. That's going to be a character in one of my books now. We're going to move on to talk about some books. And you've mentioned, both of us have mentioned a couple of times, H.P. Lovecraft. And I know he's been inspirational to you and in your own spooky offering, which we're going to talk about, which is Night of the Cross, which is a fantastic, if I may say so, a fantastic novella. It's fantastic, wonderful. And it's good enough, folks, that I listened to the audiobook back when it was originally new and shiny, which was probably 60 years ago or something.
8, I think.
8 years ago. And now I re-listened to it this week and I enjoyed it just as much the second time round. So shows that my memory is not what it was, or I kind of had an inkling of where things were going this time, because obviously I didn't completely forget it. But yeah, it's great. Short, to the point, packs an epic punch. So
glad you liked it.
Said, in fact, it was me.
Is that what you said? Is that your...
something like that? Yeah, that's my quote. It's something like it's a short story that packs an epic punch, or something.
Yeah, that does
something like that.
Uh-huh. I'm glad you liked it. I never really thought it was that good.
No, I really enjoyed it, and in fact, it's if you hadn't written that, I probably would not have written my only published novella, which was actually as a result of me reading yours and thinking, well, that's a good idea. I'm going to do something similar, which we'll move on and talk about that in a minute. But
we'll talk about both of these, yeah.
Yeah, but so Knight of the Cross. Do you want to give people a little background of what it's about?
I don't really remember it myself, to be honest. You probably, it's fresh on your mind. I said that I never liked it that much. It was a very hard book to write for some reason. I think it was just, I was working full time at the time. My son must have just been born, and my daughter would have been 7 or so at the time. So I was really tired all the time. And I distinctly remember trying to write that book and falling asleep and stuff while I was doing it. So I just had a really hard time writing it, and I had to do a huge amount of editing to it, even though it was a short novella. It was just a hard book to write. So I'm really proud of how it came out, and I think there's some really good ideas in it, and it's a good story. But it's always been one that it's like the lowest ranked of all my stories, basically, on Amazon.
In your mind, or from other people?
No, from like the star ratings,
really?
It's like 4.1 or something compared to other ones.
But do you think that's because it's not strict historical fiction?
Well, there's partially that as well, yeah, because a lot of people just do not understand it. And
well, I think I can imagine some readers that like historical fiction would read it and go, "Oh, this is too close to fantasy. I don't like it," because I've had similar comments to my novella Kin of Cain, which I wrote as a result of reading yours. People are a bit not really interested in the genre bending, but I really enjoyed it, and I think, I mean, yours is more overtly fantasy than mine.
Yeah, there's that. I mean, I think there's a monster and stuff in it. Well, in fact, yours is as well.
Yeah, but without giving too much away, I mean, mine is all explained by.
Yeah, that's right.
It's real, but it's spooky, isn't it? But yours, you've got to. So let me rewind. It's so it doesn't come across that it was difficult to write at all. It reads really well. And the guy who does the narration on the audiobook, for the most part, great. There was only a couple of moments I thought, oh, he's pronounced that word weird, which I always have with him, that particular guy. I remember something else, and he pronounced the word funny in one of your other books. I can't remember which one it was. But he's good though. He gives a good performance, and I enjoyed it. And so it's set in the island of Rhodes, and it's the Knights of Spitler who have taken over the island.
I had to do a huge amount of research for it as well, considering how short it is, because I don't know anything about Rhodes.
Well, this is it, and I can imagine, and this is what's happening to me with the books with the novels that I'm writing at the moment, because I've got people, they've gone to Norway, and I've never been to Norway, and now I've written a book about France, and I don't really know anything about France. Now we're in the south of Spain. I don't know the history of that area. So with each book, when you move to a different location, it becomes a real headache. There's a lot of research that's needed, but I guess that's part of the challenge. But it's great. It reads really well. So they've come there and they've discovered. So that there's a character, Sir Richard. I can't remember his surname.
Lee.
At Lee.
Yeah, he's from Robin Hood.
Yeah. So Sir Richard at Lee, and he's a Knights of Spitler, and he's a character from one of your Robin Hood books.
Yeah, the whole series. Well, yeah,
of the whole series, and he's
not in the whole series. No, I forgot about that. Don't want to spoil it, but no, he's not.
but okay, so but it's like it's a prequel to that. So it's his life before he goes to England and ends up encountering Robin Hood and all of that.
Yep.
He's involved in this strange satanic stuff that's going on. So the book starts where there's men have gone missing, have been spirited away and taken away, and it's all very spooky. And they send Richard to go and investigate with one of the sergeants at arms, and they go off to this village to investigate. And the story continues from there, and they investigate and get embroiled in the skullduggery of the evil satanic people. I mean, I don't know. I don't want to give too much away.
They're not satanic.
Yeah. Well, they're worshipping a sort of demon-ish thing.
Dagon.
They would have thought they were satanic, I'm guessing.
Really. Yeah, to a Christian, I suppose it would be.
And even to the people doing the worshipping, if it's what century is it, like 14th century?
Yeah,
13th?
14th.
It would have all been. It was witchcraft, some sort of thing. Anyway, so yeah, Dagon.
Yeah, but it's Dagon rather than Satan, who is actually a fish god. from I'm not even sure.
Mesopotamia or somewhere.
Yeah, exactly
or,
that. I'm
yeah.
sure it is Mesopotamian.
Which links into H.P. Lovecraft, because H.P. Lovecraft
Well,
uses
he's one
all
of
these
the
names of.
he's one of the names from H.P. Lovecraft, but he stole that one. He often makes up names like Cthulhu that are unpronounceable by humans.
Yeah.
Dagon is one of his, but he did take it from there.
So that's your nod to H.P. Lovecraft and his otherworldly creatures, and so they're trying to summon this evil god, basically, and or whatever he is, spirit being, and yeah, it's great. It's really very, very atmospheric, very spooky. You kind of, it's short, so you sort of know that it's going to come to a climax quite quickly. But I enjoyed the fact that I could just drop in, and in a couple of hours, the story was done. But I have some questions for you about it. And I would recommend to anyone listening, if you want a really short, punchy, scary tale, I won't tell any more about what's going on and how it's all resolves. You can read it. But there's some things that you mentioned in there. You've got this mention of sort of, there's lots of people in the village that have got their eyes are all black and weird. Is that linked to some actual thing?
Well, yes. I think it's probably just an internet phenomenon and it's not real. But apparently it's real that there's these black-eyed children that go around to people's doors. So you'll be lying in your bed sleeping one night and there'll be a chap at the door and you'll go down and there'll be two children there wanting you to invite them in because they're lost. This is like 3 a.m. And apparently this has happened to people in real life. But then the homeowner will notice that they've got these completely black eyes and they'll suddenly become terrified and they'll shut the door and the kids will be outside shouting, please let us in, please let us in. And obviously, if you let them in, bad stuff will happen.
Sounds terrifying.
Yeah, but they're really interesting stories. And if you believe them, it's terrifying. I don't personally believe them. I think it's just another internet creation like Slender Man, who was actually supposed to be in that book, but I thought it was a step too far with the internet age. But the black-eyed people are just my nod to modern folklore with the internet and taking it back to add it into medieval folklore. I thought it was quite an interesting idea.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely people with eyes which are, pupils are hugely dilated or whatever.
Scary.
It's quite scary to look at and weird and otherworldly. And also there could be explanations.
I'm not sure. I'm not sure
I
if
think
there is.
I think you explain it in the book, actually. Someone
Maybe
who's
there is.
you sort of, well, I won't.
I don't remember, to be honest. If there's a natural explanation,
there's an explanation of, because I think the implication is that the real Dagon worshippers have got this sort of thing going on because of the rituals they're performing or something. But someone else, they mention belladonna or something in some bits. So I don't know.
I think I use belladonna for a lot of stuff in my books.
Yeah, just use belladonna. Well, belladonna does make your pupils dilate. So women used to use it to make their pupils dilate. So they used to actually drop it into their eyes. Belladonna. I mean, it's called belladonna because it means beautiful woman.
Right. Because
so beautiful lady, because it makes ladies beautiful with their eyes.
Well, anyway. I know for amphetamine, speed will make your pupils go bigger.
Does it make your pupils go bigger or smaller? I thought it was.
Well, maybe it's smaller than that. I'm not an expert on drug taking.
Well, we've ascertained that obviously I am.
That's
one of my specialities.
Okay, well, it does something to your pupils, so I suppose there could be a natural explanation to make them bigger. Then
moving on from my drug taking, there's another phenomenon that you mentioned in the book that I was interested. You mentioned in the author's note at the end as well that you've actually suffered from this thing, and until recently I had never had, but recently I suffered something similar. So we'll talk about this. So sleep paralysis, and you have this very scary scene, and this is really good for a sort of a Halloween horror type story. This scary scene where Richard wakes up, supposedly, and he sees stuff happening around him in his room, and he's unable to move. And it's terrifying because he's unable to move, and that's the horror of it. And you said in the author's note that you've actually suffered from this.
it still happens quite often. I've realised that if I fall asleep on my back, it's pretty much guaranteed to happen. So I always just sleep on my side now because it is terrifying.
So when it happens in real life, I mean, how does it manifest itself then? So you wake up and you just can't move.
I think it's got to the stage now where I know that I'm asleep, and
So
I know it's sleep paralysis. Most people are probably haven't at that stage. I'm 45 now, and I think it first happened when I was about 20. So I've got a lot of experience of this happening to me, where I've come to understand it a bit better. And it's a well-known fact. It does happen. What happens is you're still asleep, your body's shut down, so you can't harm yourself by acting out your dreams, so you won't move. But your brain basically comes awake, and you're trying to move then, and so your dreams are real to you, but your body won't let you react to them. So you will be out asleep, but you'll see somebody coming into your room. And that's usually what happens to me is I'll know somebody's, like a burglar's broke into the house and they're coming towards me in the bed, and I won't be able to move. And at this stage in my life, I'll know that it's sleep paralysis, but it's still absolutely terrifying because you can't move and you're fearing this danger's coming. And what I can do nowadays is I'll start to groan, and then my wife will wake up and she'll shove me or whatever and, wake me up like that. But yeah, it happens.
It does sound terrifying.
It really is.
When I first listened to the audiobook of Night of the Cross, I'd never experienced this, and so I just thought, oh, that's something that happens to someone.
So I've caused it for you then.
Well, no, I don't think so. So it happened to me before I reread it. It didn't happen to me after reading the book, but it just made me remember. I'd forgotten about it because it's only happened to me once, as far as I'm aware.
Mm-hmm.
And it was this summer. I went on holiday to Prague, and we were in Prague, and we went to Vienna as well. But in Prague, Prague has got it's a beautiful city, lovely city, and really loved the place, and loads of beer, and it's all great. But it's got a very dark history.
Oh, of course.
The time of the Second World War, and we spent a day visiting lots of the Jewish memorials and things, and it was really harrowing. And I was really upset about it, because it's impossible not to be if you're not a mad person.
Mm-hmm.
You go into a synagogue that is just covered in writing, from head, all over all the walls in tiny writing, and it's just the names and the dates of every single person that was killed from Prague, and the last date they were known to be alive. And it's literally tens of thousands of people. And it's just,
what was this, the Nazis?
Yeah. So during the occupation, so they had they killed, the Nazis came in and killed basically all the Jews. I mean, it was just awful. And they had a guy anyway, this is kind of going off the topic here, but they had the Nazis sent the guy that was to run Prague, and he was later known as the Butcher of Prague. I mean, he came in and just, he was like the governor or whatever they called him, and he came in and just basically was killing everybody left, right, and center, and it was just a nutter. And the British actually flew in some guys to try to assassinate him, and there's a whole thing about they managed to kill him in the end, but then they got caught, and it was just, so we went to all this stuff, and it was very interesting but incredibly harrowing. And I think that was partly to do with it. So obviously my mind was full of all this, and in the night in the hotel, and we were in the city centre, so it's an old building as well and everything, so I don't know, it's cool, you start thinking, have places got a residual energy? I don't know, but anyway, it was, we had a good time, it was all wonderful. But in the night I woke up where I felt like I was awake, and I was sure that there was an evil presence in the room approaching me, and I couldn't move.
Yeah.
And it spoke to me, it whispered to me or spoke to me, and it was just, I can't remember what it said now, but I just was, it was absolutely terrifying, because I was convinced that there was somebody, like, his head in the darkness of the room was like 5 inches away from my face, whispering, I'm gonna kill you or something. It's really horrible, really terrifying.
But you don't hear the words, you don't know what's said.
I can't remember now what it was saying, but I was just absolutely terrified. And I remember waking up and later on, that night or that morning, and just thinking, oh my God, that was awful. But this only time it's happened to me. I wonder if it was to do with all that
really oppressive atmosphere,
and just being
It could be. you're obviously influenced by what you've read and stuff. There was one time, I've had all these various sleep paralysis experiences over the years, and they're always the same or similar. I know what it is, and when I wake up properly, I know exactly what it was. But I had one when I was, again, about 21 or something, and I woke up, or I thought I woke up, and I saw an alien walking out the room. And the scary thing was, it never felt like sleep paralysis. It was different. And I can't remember how I knew, but I looked at the clock or something and I could see it. And then a few seconds later, I genuinely woke up and I looked at the clock and it was right. It was the same as what it had been during the sleep paralysis. And it was as if, I'm actually getting a bit of a cold shiver here just now. It was totally that. It was as if I'd actually woke up and seen an alien walking out my bedroom. And it was, that was really scary. But I was so into UFO books and stuff at the time that I'm sure my mind just created it. But that was different. That was the only one time that was different from all the other sleep paralyses.
The important question here is, were you anally probed?
Well, I don't think so. Who knows? Well, let's go to Kin of Cain. Like the Christians and the Americans, you ripped me off with Kin of Cain. Although you didn't really, did you? It was more Beowulf.
Yeah, well, there's it's a very veiled, it's a very thinly veiled retelling of the Beowulf story. And Beowulf, of course, being the seminal Old English epic saga. And we don't know when Beowulf was written. It mentions some real people in the story. So they know that it was written after those people had lived, obviously. Hugelac, I think, is the name of one of the people. And there's different, Hrothgar or whatever, there's different people that we know really existed. So they know it's after that. But I had this theory and this thought, and I thought, what about if it was actually not written where, I think often they say it was written down in the East Anglia or something, but I said, well, let's imagine it wasn't written there, but it was actually, the story came from Northumbria in the time, just around the time of my books of the Bernicia Chronicles, and it could become a prequel to the Bernicia Chronicles. And so it lent itself to being a spooky story. As I said, I'd read your novella and I decided this was a great idea. I was going to write some novellas in between the novels to kind of do palate cleansing on myself. This would be great. I've since discovered that novellas don't sell at all, and so I didn't actually bother doing any more because it's just a total waste of time.
Well, you're right. They don't sell as much as the novels. Mine don't either. But I just quite like doing them. They're fun.
Yeah, and I have since written one novella set in the 19th century that I wrote earlier this year, and I did enjoy writing that as well. So they are really enjoyable to do, but they're still hard work, like you said. I mean, it still took me 6 weeks or something to write this novella, and so it's a chunk of work. Because if you're not going to sell it or not going to make much money out of it, it feels difficult to do it. But yeah, so the idea was I'll do this sort of spooky story with the unknown, this fear of the unknown, the fear of the monsters. Fear. It's set in winter time, so there's something out there killing the sheep, killing people. Well, I think it's killed a few sheep or livestock, and then it starts killing people. And of course, at that point, the king says we better go and send someone out to investigate and put a stop to this monster, this night stalker, this Nichtgänger that is out there killing people. And so that's really the story. And it's Beobrand's brother Octa is sent out with Bassus and a few others, and they go off as a little band of warriors in search of what's doing the killing.
The first time I read it, I never realised how close it was to the Beowulf story. So I've never read Beowulf in the text, but I've seen the Ray Winston movie. And I must have watched it after your story because I never realised it. It was only when I read it this week that it struck me how similar it was. But I mean, it's a great idea because Beowulf's a brilliant story. And you've just basically put your characters and your location into a brilliant story. So you end up with a brilliant story, and it's a fun read.
yeah, I mean, it's interesting because it is basically just a retelling. It's kind of like an imagining what the real story could be if if Grendel was not a monster and if it was in real life. How do these myths come about?
Yeah.
Is there someone, has there been is there a serial killer or some sort of psychopath or something around that actually becomes this?
Yeah, there's some true event or true character that then
Exactly.
gets
Yeah.
exaggerated over years and
Yeah.
becomes this
Yeah.
bizarre figure.
Exactly that. And I was sort of thinking around the thing of the period of Jack the Ripper in the 19th century and how everything got blown out of proportion then, and so a few people get murdered, and the story sort of becomes more and more outrageous, and people begin to wonder what this person can be. Is it some devil worship going on? Is there who is it that's doing these things? And people imagine all sorts of.
And that's another Jack.
Another
Jack the Ripper, to go with a stingy Jack from
exactly
earlier, or Spring-heeled Jack around the same time.
Yeah.
A lot of these Jacks are crazy.
And of
but
course,
yeah,
the
it's
other.
definitely a good story. Sorry.
Well, no, I was just going to say the other link to, of course, Beowulf and Beobrand is the Beo at the name, so the sort of the play on words there of his name, and the fact that Beobrand's sword. So this all happened actually. It was inspired. I was inspired to write a novella because of your novella, but the reason that I actually chose to write that story is I remember that a reader called James Webb, not the Telescope, but a reader, contacted me and asked me if the sword that Beobrand has or acquires in the serpent sword, which is called Hrunting or Hrunting, he said, is it the Hrunting from Beowulf? And I'd taken the name from Beowulf of the sword. Right. Because there's a couple of swords that are named in Beowulf, and I'd taken this name of the sword from Beowulf because I thought, what's a real name of an Old English name for a sword? And I found this. There's not many. There's not much written, about in Old English. So this is one of the few that's really a name of a sword from Old English. So I thought, well, I'll use that.
And you thought nobody would ever notice?
Well, I don't know. I just sort of in the back of my mind, I thought it's fine. I'll just use it. But I didn't specifically link. I didn't think there was, he was Beowulf. I just had this thing. But then I thought, oh, hang on a minute. What if it? Because is it the sword from Beowulf? And I thought, well, what if it is?
That's a perfect idea.
The sword? And I thought, okay,
Easter egg.
And if people read the whole series, there's later on, and this nobody really, I don't think, has pulled up on this, but later on there's a book where something happens with Beobrand's sword, and there's another sword, and that is again my nod to Beowulf and the fact that the saga is obviously Beobrand's story is nothing like Beowulf's by this point, and he's doing all these different things. But the fact that the sword names have similarities and things happen to the swords similar to what happens to the swords in Beowulf, it just seemed like a way of continuing this sort of, I don't know, the poem or the story of Beowulf.
Yeah, added interest for anyone who would notice.
Yeah, where nobody seems to have noticed.
I'm sure people have. They've just never mentioned it yet. I did watch the movie Beowulf and Grendel. I think is that what it's called?
Is that the one with
the other Scottish
Gerard
guy?
Butler?
Yeah, from just up the road from me.
Yeah. What did you think?
I thought it was quite good. It's obviously quite old because I've written down here pre-CGI ? Because that's what it looks like. So I'm assuming it is.
So it's an interesting question. They decided not to use any CGI. It was actually made in the early noughties. It was made after the Lord of the Rings movies, so there was definitely lots of CGI out there. And they made a conscious decision to film everything on location with physical props, physical buildings. It was all filmed in Iceland.
Why? You told me that, but I don't understand why they filmed it in Iceland, because it's not set in Iceland.
It's not set in Iceland, but they decided that they were because of the landscape was amazing. It's the same as the Northman is all filmed in Iceland. It's because Iceland looks great.
But Iceland hadn't even been settled by the time of Beowulf was written.
No, but they just wanted to make it to look amazing because you've got these huge cliffs and.
I never even knew that. I only found that Iceland hadn't been settled after you told me it was filmed there.
Oh yeah.
And I realised then that it hadn't been settled. And I thought that was quite an interesting thing, that nobody had ever lived there until, I don't know, what, the 11th century or something, 10th.
Yeah. So it's I don't know, yeah, 10th century, probably 900s. So it's a really interesting film because I think that it suffers from being at the very sort of early stages of, obviously the first really big CGI movie was well, Terminator 2, and then Jurassic Park was the one that totally broke in, like the
Yeah.
CGI stuff in 93, 94, something around then. So early 90s. So
Well, Terminator 2 must have been before that.
yeah, it's 91, 92, something
Right.
like that. So it's early, really early 90s is when CGI started to become a thing. By the time that Beowulf and Grendel, the movie, was made, CGI was very, very powerful, and
Yeah, I
they were doing
suppose.
things like Jar Jar Binks and the whole of the Star Wars
I can
prequels,
see why they decided not to do
and
it.
they decided not to use it. But I think it suffers from the fact that the audience, as an audience member, you're watching it and you're thinking, well, because I remember watching it at the time and I was thinking, it doesn't look that great, because you think you're used to things looking fantastic, or so it's sort of it kind of loses everything. It's, if it had been made in the 1970s, I think people would have said, wow, this is, it's really amazing. You've done some great stuff with the ship out in the icebergs and stuff like that. But as it is, it just looks like, well, that CG doesn't look very good. I could have.
Well, I think I watched it on Amazon Prime and it was very low resolution.
Oh, okay.
And I've written down here somehow more authentic because it's not got CGI. So to me, I thought that made it better. It was more
Well,
like Robert of Sherwood or something where
well, I
they
think
had.
that's what they wanted it to be
Yeah,
like.
well,
They
it worked
wanted it.
for me, but maybe only because it was in such low resolution. Maybe if you watched a Blu-ray in HD, it would look horrendous because it'd be obvious that it was just guys wandering around Iceland.
Well, I don't think it's bad because of that. I just think that, because I think people expect to see things that are more spectacular.
Mm,
So if you don't know that it's not got any CGI, because you knew, because I told you before you watched it, but if you don't know
yeah,
that, you just watch it and
exactly.
think, well, it could have been, because it was released in the cinema at the time. It was released. It was a proper release and everything.
It does
So
look low
people,
budget, but I thought it was quite well. And I've noted down that Gerard Butler looks like Alexander Draymond in The Last
yes,
Kingdom. It looks exactly the same.
his
It's as
gear and
if,
everything, yeah.
yeah,
Except he's
if,
wearing chainmail, which is more
but yeah,
authentic.
but the overall look is
his
it's
his
exactly the
costume's more
same, really.
authentic actually than Alexander Draymond.
Except he's kept his top on, I've written here. Not that I was disappointed or anything. Maybe I shouldn't have wrote that down.
Maybe you were.
Moving on. I've
Moving on.
written down humans equals the monsters.
Yes, that's the
So
main
I assume
takeaway
that
from
is
that.
the
That's the main takeaway from that story, isn't it? That the
yeah.
monsters and the scary things really are the humans, and that Grendel is this Kin of Cain, is a spawn of Cain or whatever, which is supposedly a giant, or some sort of giant people that are left over from some past time, cursed by
Just
Cain,
want
who
to be
killed his
left
brother,
alone.
and they just want to be left alone. Yeah,
Yeah, and they're hunted
but
down by the evil humans, as we always do. They ruin everything.
yeah, so I think that's really well done. That sort of twist in it all.
Yeah, I thought it was quite a good movie, but it made me think, just on another point, because we write historical fiction, was Beowulf and things like that historical fiction to the listeners originally?
Well, that's
Do you
really
know?
interesting. Is it, was it historical fiction or fantasy, or a bit of both? Was it the Game of Thrones for the mead hall?
Mm.
Were they just telling
Because
these
it would have been
stories?
set in the past for them, but the past back then was different because 200 years to them, the technology and everything was still the same. So it's not like us 200 years ago to us, or 1,000 years ago is a completely different society
Yeah,
than what even 20 years ago.
there is that. There is that. So they would have felt lots of kinship with the society, I
Yeah,
suppose. But it is interesting. I mean, it's interesting because, I mean, Beowulf. There's been lots written about Beowulf, but it's got lots of Christian allegories and things. Even the thing of Cain. Obviously Cain coming from the
yeah, of
Bible
course.
and stuff. So
Yeah,
you've got lots of Christian commentary in the story. So it shows that it was after the Old English speakers have been Christianized, but it harkens back to this warrior culture. So although they're Christian, they are basically
yeah,
acting just like
still
Vikings,
Vikings.
really.
Yeah, yeah,
They're just, and if you go back, it's we're going to fight because the bit of Grendel, and that whole bit with Grendel and his mother and the hall. That's the bit that I find really exciting and interesting, and that's the bit that most gets converted into other films or in the Kin of Cain. My story, that's really where I focus. And the bit later on with the dragon and stuff kind of gets forgotten a bit, but that's very Tolkien, I suppose, as well, when he goes and fights a dragon, a fire-breathing dragon, and at the end of the story.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think it's this martial warrior-like world that they're portraying. I don't know if it was historical fiction, but definitely
it's definitely similar
it's
to
definitely harkening back
what we
to
write.
Aspirational, almost like this is what life used to be like, how great it was,
the great time in the meat hall.
Yeah, these warriors and
the camaraderie, and then get out and kicking everybody's ass, and then coming back and having a good drink together.
And the whole thing of the honor of the warrior, and how this is like the ideal king. He was good. He was God Kuning. He was good king. He was a. So he goes and fights, and at the end, even though he knows he's going to die, he goes off and stands and fights against the dragon, gives up his life for his people, sort of thing, because he was a good king who gave.
It just shows that the stories back then was still like the same stuff.
Absolutely.
And me and you are still writing the same stuff that we're writing. It's slightly depressing, actually, when you think it like that.
Well, I think we've sort of come full circle on this, that discussion, and I think you're right. I mean, what has changed in the world? Nothing really. I mean, you look at the current
the
affairs.
Wars, yeah.
We've had in the last 2 or 3 years, we've got war, plague, intrigue at court. With people, backstabbing each other in parliament, politics, whatever. Nothing's changed. It's just the technology around it has changed, but people are still trying to gain power. We've got, Putin invading other countries.
North Korea,
saber rattling, and we've even, as I said, we've even had a plague. Just so history really hasn't changed. We
just need Grendel to appear.
Well, maybe we've got our own share of. We've got enough monsters. I don't think we don't need to have fantasy monsters. We've got human monsters. Just
unless you want to read a fantasy monster, you can read Matthew's Kin of Cain and My Own Knight of the Cross. They're both excellent.
On that note,
especially mine.
It's great. So let's move on to our final questions of the episode. What have you been reading and what have you been watching this week? I think we know what you've been reading.
Yeah, I've been reading Kin of Cain, which is actually, I don't remember if I paid for it at the time, but I'm sure it's free on Kindle Unlimited. That be right?
Pretty sure it is. If you've got Kindle Unlimited, it'll be free. And it's also available in audiobook as well, but that's not free. But if you've got access to that.
That's worth a look. And as always, I've been reading more research books for my next series, which I will be announcing soon, although by the time you hear this, I'll probably have announced it. But the contract is hopefully about to be signed for a new series by me.
Contract being signed. So that means, is this a scoop here on this means not self-publishing?
No. Unless it's the publisher don't like it when I deliver the first book to them, but no.
Well, I think once the contract's signed, that's it.
Well, I haven't signed it yet, that's what I mean. Yeah. So it should be with a publisher, but I wouldn't mention it because I haven't signed the contract just yet, and I won't tell you what it's about in case somebody steals my idea. So that's what I've been reading, was the research, loads of research books and Audible books and stuff, but great fun. And I've also been watching Cobra Kai, which you recommended ages ago, and I don't particularly like it, but I've been drawn into it because it's quite well done.
It's one of those things that it's kind of like chewing gum for the brain.
It's fun.
It's fun. You can't, and it's made in such a way that it always ends in a cliffhanger.
Yeah,
it makes you want to watch the next episode. The episodes are short, and the characters are interesting.
Yeah, they're really good. The nostalgia is there for us.
Yeah, it's great.
What about you then?
Well, I have been watching Cobra Kai as well, because normally I used to binge watch the seasons when they came out with my daughter, but she's just turned 19 and she still watches them with me, but she's so busy now. She's working every hour of the day and night. And so I don't see her as often. So I'm going through the episodes quite slowly. So I think we're like halfway through the series at the moment.
Well, this is why I'm watching it, actually. It's my daughter. She has it on all the time, but she's usually sitting on her phone.
Well,
and then she goes out the room and I'm like, well, I'm not turning this off. I want to know what happens now.
Yeah. Well, I think probably secretly my daughter's already watched it all the way through, and she's just...
mine has. Yeah, she has, and my wife.
Yeah. So, and I've been reading Warrior and Protector, the first book in the Saxon Warrior series by Peter Gibbons, who it's an arc of that, an advanced reader copy. I was sent because this is his first book that's going to be published by a traditional publisher. So like you, he started self-publishing, but unlike you, he only started self-publishing like a year and a half ago or something, and seems to have taken the historical fiction world by storm.
And published about 4 books in that time somehow.
And now this book is coming out, published by Boldwood Books, and Boldwood is made up of people that used to work for Aria and Head of Zeus, and then I'm sure there's other people now, but I think it was formed or started by my ex-editor who moved on there. So I'm still in contact with her, and she asked me if I would read this book, and I am reading it, and I'm enjoying it. And it should be out probably by the time this comes out. It will already be released. I think it's coming out in October sometime, but it's action, adventure, Saxons killing Vikings. That's pretty much all you need to know.
Sounds good.
What's the word? A tormented main character, with struggling with his past and exorcising his demons by killing Vikings.
Mm-hmm. Sounds good.
So moving on from what we've been reading and watching, have you been listening to anything new this week?
No, nothing in particular, just the usual extreme metal stuff that I listen to when I'm writing, and the Audible great courses stuff that I think I mentioned in the last episode. That's for research, but that's it. So what have you been listening to?
Well, obviously listening to Night of the Cross, which was very good. And music-wise, I've been listening to Slade, which, of course, is a very old band, and it's sort of rock/pop somewhere in there. Quite rocky in its old incarnation back in the 70s. I never really listened to them apart from the obvious Christmas, Merry Christmas song.
Well, that's the thing, Matthew. It's not Christmas, it's Halloween, so you're in the wrong episode for this.
I'm in the wrong episode, but I haven't really been listening to the Christmas thing. I listened to the Raconteurs interviewing Noddy Holden and or Noddy Holder. Anyway,
Holder, yeah, it's Noddy Holder.
Noddy Holder.
Yeah.
Anyway, and it was really interesting. He's really great raconteur on the Raconteurs. He told lots of great stories. And I didn't realize that they had a movie in 1975 called Slade on Fire. And I haven't watched it yet, but I found it for free on YouTube. It is there because it's not on any of the streaming services. I tried to find it, but I found it on YouTube, and I'm going to watch it because it looks and sounds very interesting. It's about it's like a fictionalized version of their life in music, but the story behind it sounded really great in that they had a couple of guys who wanted to write a movie with them in it, and they came on tour with Slade to America for a couple of weeks before they had nervous breakdowns and then left. But then they wrote this movie, and the guys from Slade appear in the movie and wrote some original songs for it and everything. It
sounds extremely familiar, Matthew.
Well, 1975.
Did they get stuck in a cocoon at any point?
No, but it was...
it was tiny Stonehenge.
Some of Slade's moments. It's not like that. I've watched the first 5 minutes, and it's very sort of cinema verite of the 1970s. So you're seeing sort of real sort of behind the scenes sort of, I don't know, like a wedding party in 1975 and like a band playing, having a fight and stuff. It just really...
Tiny sandwiches.
Yeah. And it just looked really interesting, and so quite nostalgic. And them doing the just writing, and just great songs as well. And so I've been listening to all their sort of greatest hits, and obviously they've got some amazing songs. They were like huge back in the early 70s.
But the spelling was atrocious.
Yeah, I did notice their affectation of the spelling things wrong became a bit ridiculous as the songs get further along. They just get more and more stupid. But yeah, Come On Feel the Noise. What a great songs.
Well, it's that good that my daughter sings it all the time. I don't know who it is. Somebody's done a cover version.
It was Quiet Riot did a cover.
No,
later.
No, because I keep telling her, listen to those two, they're better. Yeah, no, this is a modern one. I don't know who it is. Some Arctic Monkeys or something. I don't know. Some
the original was
modern.
Fantastic.
Yeah, well, that's what I keep saying. And then she says, well, you keep saying that every time you hear it.
Well, that's exactly what happens with me and my daughters.
Yeah, that is a good song.
In fact, the other day, we can end on this note talking of daughters. The other day,
How boring we are.
I got sent a TikTok by my eldest daughter, and the TikTok was just a clip from Lord of the Rings, the Fellowship of the Ring. Oh no, it's the two. It must be the Two Towers. Actually, yeah, the Two Towers when Aragorn when they find the dead bodies and stuff of the orcs and there's helmets around, and he kicks the helm and he screams, and the TikTok just said, when you watch this with someone for the first time and you have to tell them that Aragorn, actually the actor Viggo Mortensen, broke his toe when he kicked the helmet. And my daughter sent me this thing and she said, first time, she says, every time. Yes. So I thought, okay.
Has to be done.
It has to be done. That's it for today's episode. We hope you've enjoyed it. Please let us know if you have any questions or things you'd like us to cover in future episodes. You can contact us on the Facebook page, which is facebook.com/rockpaperswordspodcast, or on Twitter @rock_swords. You can find out more about our books and everything that's going on, MatthewHarvey.com and StephenAMackay.com. We're both also on Twitter and Facebook, so drop in onto those sites and say hello to us. The theme music is written and performed and copyrighted by Stephen A. Mackay and Matthew Harvey. Until next time, a Rock, Paper, Swords, it's goodbye from me, Matthew Harvey.
And it's goodbye from me, Stephen A. Mackay.
You've fallen asleep then, haven't you?
I was thinking about stuff.
And remember, whatever action and adventure you have going on in your life, be kind.
Stay safe.
And happy reading.